Horror story, Paperman. Unfolds during summer vacation at school. While most people consider it a delightful time, I despise it for reminding me of the one thing I never wanted to face: the passing of my kind and gentle grandfather 2 years ago during summer vacation. Instead of staying in the city, my parents and I immediately returned to our hometown. We stayed in the apartment building where our grandfather used to live until his Memorial Day, which was still a few days away according to the lunar calendar. The relentless chirping of insects filled my ears, and waves of stifling heat overwhelmed me, making it nearly impossible to sleep no matter how much I tossed and turned. As the scenery evoked emotions, that night I found myself reminiscing about my grandfather once again. I remembered how he used to fan me on scorching summer days and gently pat my shoulder to help me fall asleep. As those memories flooded my mind, tears welled up in my eyes and streamed down my face. Despite my best efforts to conceal them with the blanket, my trembling body didn't go unnoticed by my father. He let out a soft sigh, aware that once I had such emotions, mere persuasion from others wouldn't have much effect. He sat up and gently patted my shoulder, just like my grandfather, his touch seemingly possessing a hypnotic effect. Unbeknownst to me, I drifted off to sleep. That night, I felt as if my grandfather was by my side. On my grandfather's Memorial Day, my father woke me up early. When we arrived at my grandfather's grave, my father parked the car at a distance from the site. He drew a circle on the ground near the grave and continuously burned joss paper within it. As the paper burned, I gradually became absent-minded. Images of my grandfather flooded my mind. He was a farmer, not tall in stature, but remarkably upright. His lean figure bore the marks of time on his weathered, dark face. He often wore an otter fur hat and a fur coat while working in the fields, as the cold water from opening the floodgates to irrigate the land aggravated his severe varicose veins. A gust of wind blew me out of my reverie. The weather had been fine, so the sudden strong wind caught us off guard. The burning joss paper scattered, and my father, worried about the risk of a fire, had to burn fewer offerings. After a while, he picked up the remaining unburned joss paper from the ground one by one and placed them into a black plastic bag used for this purpose. We put the bag in the trunk and returned home. At home, my father carried the bag of joss paper. Upon seeing it, my mother's expression changed abruptly, deeming it ominous, and she urged my father to take it away immediately. My father signaled me to follow him, as I also felt an uncomfortable sensation, and we placed the joss paper in the storage room on our floor. That night, I couldn't sleep peacefully. It wasn't due to the insects or the heat, but a nameless uneasiness. In a half-dream state, I vaguely felt the presence of someone in the storage room. It took a while before I fell back into a deep sleep. The dream that followed was peculiar. I dreamt of a paperman, roughly the height of an adult, with clear imprints of white paper stuck onto bamboo strips. Strangely, the eyes of the paperman appeared unnatural against the heavy oil paint used for the cheeks. But all of this is a recollection upon waking up. In the dream, that paperman came to life, extending its arms mechanically into a T shape. Its eyes widened, as if they were about to fall out at any moment, and its feet were evenly aligned as it hopped towards me step by step. Although I felt some fear, I knew it was just a dream. Thinking it was out to harm me, as often portrayed in stories, I steadied myself and defiantly shouted, "Don't come any closer! There's nothing here for you! If you come any closer, I won't be polite!" The paperman seemed to have not heard my words or chose to ignore them. It continued to hop towards me with its mechanical steps. Fear overwhelmed me, and I instinctively moved backward. It was then that I felt something pressing against my waist. Looking around, I realized it was the kitchen of our house. I quickly grabbed a kitchen knife from the cutting board, regardless of consequences, and swung it towards the paperman. I slashed through it, causing it to burst open, and to my surprise, it bled profusely from the wound. Thinking it was over, I heard the sound of rustling paper coming from the door. I turned my head. Numerous papermen stood at the entrance, their faces contorted in eerie smiles, rushing towards me. I abruptly opened my eyes, sitting up on the bed. I was drenched in cold sweat, reluctant to recall the events of the dream. It was only when my father woke up that I discussed the dream with him. Initially, my father didn't think much of it when I mentioned the dream. However, as I continued to recount the details, his expression grew increasingly grim. When I finished narrating the dream, my father went out, and it seemed like he took the bag of joss paper with him. I could almost envision him going to the intersection, igniting the joss paper with the lighter he always carried, and waiting until everything had turned to ashes before finally leaving with peace of mind. Since then, I never had such a nightmare again. However, that experience left a deep imprint in my heart, and whenever I recollect it, I still feel a lingering sense of terror. Horror story: The Mysterious Paperman. This is a story that my aunt shared with me. It happened when she was a child in a small village in Chifeng, Inner Mongolia. In the village, there was a single man whose wife had passed away, and the children in the village called him Uncle. Uncle loved children, and the kids in the village enjoyed going to play with him. The incident in the story took place with Uncle. One day, after finishing some work at someone else's house and having dinner, it was already very late. Uncle's house was on the outskirts of the village, quite secluded, so he had to walk home alone. Because of the hospitality of the hosts during dinner, and the insistence of his fellow workers, who were drinking together, Uncle had consumed quite a bit of alcohol and was a bit tipsy. In the silent countryside at night, the small village road was pitch black, and only a few lights in the village could be seen from afar. Uncle took unsteady steps, one after another, heading home. Just as he was not far from home, he suddenly saw a patch of white light ahead on the road. Due to the alcohol, Uncle's thoughts were a bit unclear, and he thought he must have been mistaken. He muttered to himself, "What kind of ghostly thing is this? It's glowing? Who put a lamp here?" But when he looked up, Uncle was almost frightened out of his wits. It turned out to be a tall, thin figure, about 2 meters in height, resembling a white deity. He couldn't see what the face looked like, but he saw it flickering and spewing fire as it floated towards him. Uncle immediately became sober. He stepped back repeatedly, and his legs were no longer working properly. Initially panicked, but having experienced many things at his age, Uncle quickly thought of a solution. He recalled what the village elders had said. If you bite your index finger and sprinkle your blood on a dirty thing, it will be immobilized. So, with great effort, Uncle forced himself to stand still, despite the fear in his heart. He bit his index finger and waited for the creature to approach before seizing the opportunity to sprinkle his blood on it. As a result, right at the center of its mouth, the creature immediately stopped moving. With a loud pop, the creature began to shrink, getting smaller and smaller. Uncle focused his gaze and saw that the creature had transformed into a large white rabbit. The rabbit didn't move at all, and had lost its previous imposing aura. Uncle held it by the ears and walked home. The rabbit, now frightened, started whimpering, its voice filled with misery. Uncle, being kind-hearted, quickly said, "Stop crying, I won't harm you. It's not easy for you to grow this big, but from now on, you can't harm people anymore." Upon hearing Uncle's words, the rabbit indeed stopped whimpering. Uncle had his suspicions, so instead of releasing it right away, he brought it home. When Uncle arrived home, he immediately relaxed, and with the effects of the alcohol kicking in again, he tossed the rabbit onto the kang bed and fell asleep. The next day, when the sun was high in the sky, the village children noticed that there was no smoke coming from Uncle's house, so they all went to check on him. Upon entering the house, they saw Uncle still snoring. Next to Uncle was a pure white rabbit with red eyes, looking adorable. The children eagerly took the rabbit from the kang bed and began to pet it, one after another. One of the children noticed a red dot on its chest and decided to remove it. Suddenly, with a loud pop, the large rabbit disappeared. The children were startled, and they immediately started exclaiming and calling out, "Waking up Uncle!" Uncle then recounted the events of the previous night to the children. Among the group of children was my aunt, who said that after that incident, there were no more encounters with the mysterious paperman in the village.